Well, good morning. Welcome, Thrive Church. We are so happy to have you here with us today. I hope you all had a very Merry Christmas. If we haven't met, my name is Judah. I'm lead pastor here at Thrive Church, and we are coming to an end with 2024, getting ready to launch out into 2025. And man, this past year has been just a great year. We've seen God move in so many different ways. And, even for example, this past year we've had 97 baptisms that we've done. And it's just so exciting seeing people coming to faith in Christ and making that public declaration. And as we close out the year, all of these things have been possible, our campuses, all these things, because of generosity from people like you. And so if God puts it on your heart to invest in what's going on here, we encourage you to do that before the year ends. And man, we have some exciting things planned for the new year. We can't wait to talk to you about that as time goes on. So, we're wrapping up a series called Rebel Faith. We kind of changed gears a little bit there around Christmas time and turned it a little bit Christmassy, but we're wrapping that up because, it's just exciting to me looking at people in the Bible and the faith that they had, a rebellious faith, a faith that was willing to stand when everybody else knelt, a faith that was willing to go against the culture and even decrees and laws of the day in order to do God's purpose. And as we close out 2024 and we step into a new year, into 2025, many of us were looking for a fresh perspective, this little extra push to embrace the opportunities and for some of us to embrace the challenges that may lie ahead. So today we're looking at a young girl. Her name was Esther. She comes from the Old Testament. This is the first part of the Bible before Jesus came on the scene. This is the history of the Jewish nation. There's an entire book named after her, and it tells her story. She was a young Jewish girl who finds herself in a position of unexpected influence. She was an orphan who was raised by her cousin Mordecai, and by a twist of fate, more specifically by divine intervention, ends up becoming the queen of Persia. It's a story of some quiet rebellion. It's a story of someone who risked everything in order to fulfill God's purpose. See, Esther's faith defied the cultural norms. She overcame fear and ultimately was able to save her people, the Jewish nation. Now, she was living in the Persian Empire. The Persian Empire was founded in 550 BC by Cyrus the Great. If you've ever read the Bible or been in church, you've probably heard about Daniel in the lion's den, such things as that. Well, during Daniel's lifetime was when this happened. When Cyrus the Great, they came in, they invaded. Belteshazzar was the king of Babylon at the time, and they overthrew the Babylonian Empire, setting up the Persian Empire. And they conquered large amounts of territory, making this one of the largest empires in ancient history. Well, Cyrus puts Darius there into the throne. Darius becomes the king. This is the one who ultimately had Daniel thrown in the lions and such things as that. But Darius took the throne and expanded the kingdom even further. And then his son, Xerxes I, becomes the new king after him. And this is kind of where our story begins. In Esther chapter 1, verse 1. It says, "These events happened in the days of King Xerxes, who reigned over 127 provinces, stretching from India to Ethiopia." So this was a very, very large kingdom, 127 provinces. These were regions, even with multiple kingdoms underneath them. And they were known for their sophisticated administrative system. I mean, they were efficient. They were rule followers. They had extensive roads that they could travel all throughout the kingdom. They even had a postal service of sorts that allowed them to communicate fast between all of the provinces of the land. Now, King Xerxes was a powerful king, and he had an extravagant palace and an extravagant court, and he did these grand gestures of wealth and feasting. And so this is where we see the story of Esther kind of begin. King Xerxes was holding a feast for 180 days. Now, many of you had some feasts. Anybody have some feasting the past week? Okay, so some of you did. Imagine 6 months of that, right? 180 days, and they're just living it up. He's got all of his rulers, he's got all of his governors, he's got all of his officials, and they are partying. This is a party for 180 days, 6 months, half of a year, and this is displaying his wealth and his power. The last 7 days of the party, he invites everyone in the capital city of Susa to come and join in the party, from the greatest to the least, from the richest to the poorest, and he invites them to come in and party with him. And he's like, eat as much as you want, drink as much as you want. Like, there was no limits on alcohol. Also, it was interesting that it says that everybody was drinking out of his goblets, and they were gold and silver, and each was uniquely designed. They all had different, designs and patterns on them. Much like if you come to my house. If you come to my house and I give you something to drink, you're going to get a unique glass. Maybe some of your cabinets are like, now, it wasn't by design, okay? We didn't design it that way. We didn't have, someone say, oh, here, let's have a mason jar. It was just kind of like something broke, or, hey, we got a jar. Hey, we need something. Oh, hey, that's a nice looking vessel we can put liquid in. We'll put that in there. So our cabinet, maybe sort of like yours, is mismatched. His was mismatched too, but it was intentional. He had artists that designed each of these, and he's dispersing them, say, drink as much as you want. And at the end of the 7 days, while he is, as you can imagine, quite inebriated, under the influence, he calls for his queen. Now, his queen, meanwhile, was having a party of her own with all the women of the kingdom. So they were kind of separated. She's having a party, he's having a party. He calls for her to come in because she is beautiful, and he wants to show off his trophy wife. He wants to show off his queen. He wants everybody to see what a lucky guy he is. He wants to show her off. He's like, Vashti, come on in here. I'm going to display you for everyone to see how beautiful you are. And as you can imagine, her answering her drunk husband, she's like, no, I'm not going to do that. Well, this was in an era where women did not have the same rights and voice as they do now. And she said no, and now Xerxes is angry. He banishes her and he dethrones her. He's like, you are no longer the queen because you would not obey my commands. So he's got a problem now, though. No queen. So the advisors suggest that they have a beauty contest, kind of like a Miss Universe or something, except all of these women, or maybe more likely like The Bachelor. I can't stand that. But it's like that. It's like, hey, let's bring all the eligible girls, and one of you gets to marry the king. That was basically what happened here. They all come in here, and they're going to have this beauty contest from all the beautiful women throughout all the provinces. All of these beautiful women are gathered together in the capital of Susa so that the king can choose a new queen. Esther was a Jewish girl, and she was living in the Persian Empire at this time. Now, the Jewish people had been exiled 100 years earlier, around the time when Daniel and all those guys, they had gotten kidnapped. That was the time that they were exiled. She was still there. So she's kind of an outsider. And she was an orphan, as I said, raised by her cousin Mordecai. And her cousin Mordecai, he worked at the palace gate. Probably like a security guard. He was there working. He worked for the palace. He worked for the royalty. He had a very important job. And Mordecai says, hey, why don't you try out for this beauty pageant? However, I want you to keep your identity a secret. Don't tell anybody that you're a Jew, because the Jews were a minority. They were looked down upon. There was a certain level of racism there. They didn't want to. He didn't want her nationality to affect the outcome of this beauty contest. So she enters this contest. She undergoes a year of beauty treatments before meeting the king. And guys, you think your wife takes a long time to get ready, to go out somewhere? You're like, come on, we gotta go. I mean, it wasn't a year, okay? That's how long it took. Beauty treatments for a year. And she goes, and if you know the story, you know kind of what happens. She goes, she finds favor with Xerxes. He says, wow, you're the most beautiful, you're amazing, whatever else. And he crowns her to be the next queen of Persia. she was just put in this position. I mean, she had no aspirations of becoming the queen. I mean, who would? And yet here she is. In your notes, if you're taking them, sometimes God puts us in positions we never expected for his greater purpose. She didn't know the plan, but there was a reason for it. Maybe you're going through some things right now. You don't know the plan. You don't know what God has in store, but there is a reason for it. God is still in control. Well, shortly thereafter, Mordecai, the cousin, he uncovers an assassination attempt. There was a plot to assassinate the king. He overhears it. He reports it. He tells Esther, hey, Esther, I heard this is going to go on. Pass this along to the right people. She tells the king. He realizes that this was a valid threat and takes care of business with these would-be assassins. But the king, because he's a busy guy, he kind of forgets about this whole situation. But we'll come back to that later. There's another guy in this story, and he's the bad guy, Haman. Haman's the bad guy, and not He-Man, master of the universe. This is just Haman, like, hey, man. Haman was this high-ranking official, and he hates Mordecai. So Mordecai and him, they're like mortal enemies. The reason why Haman hates him is because Mordecai will not bow down when Haman walks by. So Haman walks by, and he's used to the pomp and the circumstances. I mean, he's full of pride and arrogance and ego, and he wants people to just bow when they see him. He wants people to be in awe. Mordecai, who serves the one true God, is like, I'm not doing that. I don't bow to anybody. And so this ticks off Haman, and then Haman discovers that Mordecai is a Jew. When he realizes that, he concocts a plan, and he convinces Xerxes, the king, to issue a decree that allows for the execution of all the Jews in the entire empire. They say, on this day, go and find a Jew and kill him. That was basically the decree. Xerxes wasn't fully thinking it through. He signs it. He's like, yeah, sure, whatever. We're going to go for this. Well, then Mordecai hears about this, and he talks to Esther again. He says, Esther, you need to speak to the king on behalf of your people. Now, approaching the king uninvited was a capital offense, but Mordecai reminds her that she's in this position for a reason, and this is where we find ourselves in Esther chapter 4, verse 13. It says, Mordecai sent this reply to Esther. Don't think for a moment that because you're in the palace, you'll escape when all other Jews are killed. Like you'd almost think that he would be like, hey, this is some scary stuff going on. You might want to lay low. You might want to hide. He's like, don't think you're going to escape. Like, just because you're queen doesn't mean you're going to get out of here free. He says, if you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews will arise from some other place, but you and your relatives will die. Who knows if perhaps you were made queen for just such a time as this. I mean, these are some heavy words. Some of us, we have friends like that in our life, family members that will just speak the truth. They'll just speak the honesty to you. And that's what he's doing. He's like, don't think that you're going to get off free. Don't think, and if you abandon your people now, God will raise somebody else up. He's like, but I think you're there for a purpose. Now, Esther didn't plan on being queen. She had no aspirations to that. It just kind of happened. But Mordecai realized that God had planned the events. And he had placed her where she needed to be at the right time and the right place. He didn't assume that the circumstances were random. And Mordecai is now calling on Esther to serve God's people. He's saying, this is your time. You're there. You're probably the only one who can make a difference in this kingdom, saving your people, and it's time for you to stand up. As we leave 2024 and we enter a new year, we should be asking ourselves, where has God placed me? Where has God placed me for such a time as this? Maybe God has placed you in the family that you're in for a reason. Maybe he's placed you in your workplace for a reason. Perhaps in your community, maybe in your school. Maybe he's placed you there. Maybe it's not random and coincidence that you got the opportunity that you did. Maybe, just maybe, God has a plan and a reason for you being there for such a time as this. This past week, I was trying to get ready for Christmas. I decided I was going to change change a light fixture in our entryway. I'm not an electrician. I'm not very good at it, but I can change the light fixture usually. And so I'm in there, and I start getting ready to change this light fixture, and I'm taking down the old light fixture. And as soon as I take down this bracket that like holds the light to the ceiling, I hear this cracking sound, and I feel the ceiling starting to come down. I'm like, wait a minute, this is not good. I'm pretty sure it's not supposed to happen. I'm pretty sure the ceiling's supposed to stay up there and not come. Now I start to panic. I'm like, what's going on? I'm using all my strength, doing an overhead press, holding the ceiling up, because I feel like if I let go, like this whole thing may just come down. I call for my wife, Carrie. I'm like, come in here. She climbs up on the ladder. I'm like, you got to attach this new bracket, so she's trying to do this. I'm trying to hold up the ceiling. We're going, Reuben, he comes running out. We're all trying to figure out how to get this thing done. For about 10 minutes, we're wrestling. I'm just like holding the ceiling up. I felt like Atlas holding the world or something. And in the end, she was able to get the bracket in there. So if you ever come over to my house, the ceiling is held up by a light fixture, okay? I'm sure it's not supposed to be that way, but right now that's going to have to do. I say all that to say this. Carrie and Reuben, ultimately, they were there at the right time in the right place for such a time as this. Because I'm thinking, like if nobody was here, like sometimes I just do projects. I'm like, if nobody was here, like this would have been bad. Because I would have had both. Like I'm just either going to be here until I die, or the whole ceiling's coming down. Like I don't know what's going on. For such a time as this. See, God has placed you where he's placed you for such a time as this. The Persian law said that nobody could come to the king without an invitation. You couldn't just barge in there and have a conversation with him. Not even the queen. If you barged in there, like this was a crime that could be punishable by death. If he was in a bad mood, that could have been it. He already banished one queen. And now Queen Esther's going to go in there. And unless if he holds out his royal scepter, like you're doomed. And Esther had every reason to remain silent. She could have felt safe in her palace. Safe. You say, well, you know what, maybe it'll affect everybody else, but not me. But she chose to speak. She chose to act, knowing that remaining silent wasn't an option if her people were going to be saved. See, she had courage. In your notes, courage isn't the absence of fear, though. It's choosing to do what's right despite the fear. You can be afraid and still take the step, still have courage and bravery. See, where is fear holding you back in your life? Where is fear holding you back? Is God calling you to take a stand this year? Is God calling you to take a risk, to take a step of faith this year? And maybe fear is holding us back. See, Esther reminds us that obeying God sometimes comes with real risks. She had some real risks that she was up against. She didn't know how it was going to all unfold. In Joshua 1:9, says this is my command, be strong and courageous. Be strong and courageous as you go into the new year. Be strong and courageous as you go into your workplace, as you go into your homes, as you go into your school. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged. Underline this next sentence, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. And that is good news, to know that wherever I go, he's with me. No matter what valley I go through, no matter what storm I go through, God is there with me. For the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. And this resonates with Esther's bravery in approaching the king despite the risk. There was a huge risk there, but God's presence gives us courage. And she does it. She does it. She goes in there and he extends his thing. He's happy to see her. He's not in a bad mood. He goes in there. He's like, what do you want, Esther? I'll give you anything you want. You just tell me. She's like, I want to invite you and Haman. I want you guys to come for dinner. I'm going to make dinner for you. And so he's like, okay, great. So they all go and they have dinner, the three of them. They're having a good time. And then at the end of dinner, she's like, he's like, well, you had us for dinner. Now, what do you want? Like, just tell me what you want. I'll give you whatever you want. She's, I'd like you to have you over for dinner again tomorrow night. And I kind of wonder about that. And there's some debates out there as to why, but it's like, it's almost like maybe she got cold feet. Maybe she's just trying to like boost up the courage. Maybe she's trying to get some goodwill and favor for the king, but she doesn't say anything at first. She's like, come back tomorrow night and then I'll tell you. Now, as Haman is leaving, okay, so Haman was there, the bad guy. Remember? As he's leaving, he sees Mordecai again. And Mordecai doesn't bow. And so Haman is just like fuming now. Like he is just livid. He is so angry that Mordecai will not bow. He decides, he's like, tomorrow I'm going to execute him. I'm just going to, he already put out this whole decree that all the Jews were going to get killed anyway. But he's like, I can't wait for that. I'm just going to do it now. I'm going to kill Mordecai. Well, the king, meanwhile, can't sleep that night. So he doesn't have entertainment like we do. You know, he can't fall asleep watching Netflix or whatever. So he's like, story time for the king. He calls in one of his servants to read some stories to him. Stories about who? Stories about himself, of course, and all the great things that he's done. So this guy's like reading him all these stories. And as he's reading the stories, he tells a story about Mordecai saving his life from the assassination attempt. And so the king's like, oh, wow, that's a great story. He's like, how did we repay this guy? And the servant's like, we didn't. We just kind of forgot about it. And the king's like, oh, that's not good. That will never do. He's like, I need somebody in here to help me. They bring Haman in. So Haman comes back in. The king's like, what should I do if I really wanted to honor somebody? Now, as you can imagine, Haman is egotistical. He's proud. He's like, oh, well, let me tell you, because he thinks it's about himself, right? So he's like, here's what I would do. If I were you, king, I would put my finest robe on this person. And I would put him on the finest horse. And I would have one of your most important noblemen lead this horse throughout the city, shouting out, this is what the king does for someone he wishes to honor. The king's like, that is a brilliant idea. Now go find Mordecai and do that for him. So now Haman is humiliated. He's leading Mordecai, saying, this is how the king wants to honor you. This is how God honors the person, or how the king honors, what he does for the person that he wishes to honor. And so now, like, Haman is, devastated. Then they go for dinner again. And at dinner, the king's finally like, tell me what you want. Esther's like, okay, well, I just wanted you to know that I'm about to be executed, and I kind of don't want to be. And the king's like, what do you mean you're going to be executed? She's like, well, there's this decree that went out that says all the Jewish people are going to be executed, and ta-da, I'm a Jew. And the king's like, who came up with this idea? And she's like, that guy over there, Haman did. And now Haman is in the hot seat. The king was furious. Haman's begging for his life, all that stuff. The king ends up basically allowing the Jews to defend themselves, puts a tragic end to Haman's life, and the story goes on. But Esther was able to save the people because she was there at the right time. Now, although this book never mentions God in the entire book, we see his handiwork throughout it because the entire story pivots on these coincidences. Is it a coincidence? No, absolutely not. This is God moving in a difficult situation. These things only make sense in a divine plan. We see God working behind the scenes to save his people at just the right time. See in your notes, God is always working, even when he seems invisible. God ever seem invisible in your life? In the difficulties you're facing, and the sickness, and the diagnosis, and the loss? We've all been through some stuff, right? There's times in our life that we go through things and we don't see God's hand in it until much later. Maybe 2024 had some disappointments for you. Maybe you went through some loss. Maybe you had some sickness. Maybe you had some bad reports. Maybe you had some job changes, some relationship issues. You've gone through some things. Maybe you had some closed doors. And now we're like, God, where are you in the middle of that? Let me tell you, he was there. And over time, often we can look back and we can see that he was guiding us through it, guiding us to something bigger, guiding us in his perfect plan. We don't understand the difficulties while we're in them, but we can trust that God is there in the details. It says in Isaiah 59, verse 1, listen, the Lord's arm is not too weak to save you, nor is his ear too deaf to hear your call. Sometimes we're like, does God even hear me? Is God even powerful? Let me tell you, God is powerful. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever, the same God who has done all these miraculous things, is the God who is with us right now. And remember this, do not forget it in your notes, God never clocks out. God never takes a break. He's not taking a nap. He's not snoozing on the problem that you're facing. God is aware. God is there. And again, you might have been going through some difficult things. I'm going through difficult things right now in my life and in my family, honestly. Going through some crazy stuff I wish that we weren't going through. But God never clocks out. And we can trust in his hidden hand. We can trust that he is there, that he's never leaving us and never forsaking us. It says further on in Isaiah or actually back a little bit, Isaiah 55, verse 8. He says, my thoughts are nothing like your thoughts. That's a good thing because, sometimes we get some crazy thoughts, right? God's like, my thoughts are not like your thoughts. He says, my ways are far beyond anything you could imagine. For just as the heavens are higher than the earth, so my ways are higher than your ways, and my thoughts are higher than your thoughts. As we're going through things, sometimes we think, like, how could God let this happen to me? Why am I going through this difficulty? And God's saying, look, you're not seeing things from my perspective. Your thoughts are not like my thoughts. He sees the beginning from the end. And Esther's story is a powerful example of rebellious faith. Someone who lived against the grain by taking a stand. When everything around just says, stay silent, protect yourself, keep your head down, take care of your own skin, she believed that God positioned her there for a reason. And she risked her life and she trusted in God. She trusted in God enough to take a step, to take a leap, to go and risk her own life to save the lives of her people. Why do we question God and the difficulties? She could have questioned it. Esther's choice to risk her life not only saved the Jews, but it impacted the future generations, paving a way for the Jewish nation to thrive rather than to be destroyed. And sure, Esther would have been scared, as any of us would have been. Probably asking the same question that we do. Why, God? Why, God, did you let this happen to me? God, why are you allowing my people to get destroyed? And she could have focused on the problems as we so often do. God, why did you allow me to go through this relationship hardship? God, why did you allow me to go through this layoff? God, why are you allowing me to go through financial hardship? God, why are you allowing this sickness? God, why did you allow this loss in my life? And we can focus on the problem instead of realizing that we are a part of God's plan. She was a part of God's plan, and you are a part of God's plan too. Whatever is going on, whatever difficulty you may face, you are part of God's plan. What if God has you there for such a time as this? In your notes, final thing, that you are where you are for such a time as this. God has not made a mistake in where he has placed you. And we often underestimate how one decision or one conversation or one risk can transform a destiny, ours or somebody else's. And God can use these small acts of courage to make a massive difference in our world if we're willing to have a rebellious faith, if we're willing to take a stand, if we're willing to boldly take a step when nobody else will. As we go into this new year, let our call be, say, God, use me how you see fit. I trust you. I know you're there. I know you're strong, and I want to be used by you. Let's pray. Well, God, we come to you now and we thank you. We thank you for this year you've brought us through. And some of us, quite honestly, we feel like we're barely through it. We're barely hanging on. But we thank you nonetheless, because we know you've never left us and you've never forsaken us. And we know that you're working in the details, and we choose to trust in you. If you're here today and your life is not right with God, the Bible says anyone who calls on his name will be saved. That if you believe God raised Jesus from the dead and you say with your mouth that he's your Lord, that you'll be saved. And if that's where you are today, won't you call on his name? As our last faith act of 2024, won't you call on his name and say, Jesus, you are my Lord. I can't do this without you. God, give us a bold faith. Give us a rebellious faith. Give us a faith that can move mountains. Let us not put our focus on the difficulties, on the problems, on the storms, on the issues, on the loss, on the finances, on all these things that can take our eyes off of you. Let us put our eyes firmly on you. Let us march forward with boldness, with courage, with bravery, knowing that you are there with us. You've not left us. You've not forsaken us. And the situations of our life have not caught you off guard, because you are good and you love us and you have a plan and you are guiding us. And for that, we thank you. We put our faith, our trust, and our hope in you and you alone. In Jesus' name, amen. Let's stand together and sing.